Welcome to Cultural Fugazi, an optimistic take on the culture of the end times. Today, we're going to be talking about a couple of movies. Justice, what movies are we talking about today?
So, sticking with the theme of identity politics, we were really going through an excuse to allow us to watch American fiction and talk about it on the podcast was kind of, I think where we had ended up. We knew we were going to watch it anyway.
That may or may not be accurate.
Yeah. We were going to read the book that we read 2 weeks ago, regardless.
Yes.
But we were trying to find out how we pair identity politics with what we wanted to do this week. We ended up watching Spike Lee's Bamboozled, which is a 2000 film by Spike Lee, obviously. And we're going to talk about that first. We also ended up pairing that with Network. So we did watch Network for the first time. We'll kind of go into that. It's kind of beside the point, but it adds to kind of the media literacy of what Spike Lee is trying to accomplish with Bamboozled.
Turns out kind of required reading for Bamboozled.
Yeah. And then we watched American Fiction, which is in theaters. Like, it was technically released in December, but it was not wide. It was not like theater wide or whatever. So we went and saw that today. So we're going to talk about that. A fresh take from us today.
It's true. And that was directed by Cord Jefferson.
Oh, yeah.
Also wrote it. So our thesis for today is the worst versions of identity politics reduce people to archetypes. For example, The Black Minstrel Show, which collapses the experience of groups of people into stereotypes. And the movies we watched are going to interrogate this, and each is going to take a unique approach to expand the conversation around identity, specifically around Black identity. So, Bamboozled. Whew!
I was telling you this earlier. We're going to have to we did stop and eat a bunch of snacks upstairs, so we cannibalized some of the conversations. So some of this is going to be a rehash for us. For you, the viewer at home, well, a listener at home, it won't matter. But I have not seen too many Spike Lee movies. I could not tell you one off the top of my head that I'm like, definitely saw this one. So I knew a little bit about what I was getting into with watching a Spike Lee movie. I don't think I knew. I did some reading ahead of time on kind of what Bamboozled is, which is how we both ended up watching Network. I didn't really know what exactly I was in for.
Yeah, it's we like to say subtlety is for cowards pretty frequently on this podcast and just in general.
Most of the time that we talk about anything.
Yeah, it's true. And if there is a director who is the epitome of subtlety is for cowards, I think Spike Lee, he's got a pretty solid claim to that title. He often has a message, and he's going to make sure that you cannot escape that message. You cannot miss that message. And I think Bamboozled might be one of the movies where he does this the most.
It is definitely a movie that we'll get into some of the details of what parts of this movie really worked for me and kind of I think what part of this is effective or not effective. But if there was a hammer that had, which I think like part of the production studio logo is a hammer.
Yes,
it is. It is literally, yeah, the Spike Lee hammer for subtlety. There's no such thing as subtlety. It is, in fact, for cowards. We are going to get into kind of the messiness of, how media has portrayed the Black experience for an extended period of time as part of that film. Like, he's going to do it.
Yeah, and it's very clear that there are a lot of ways in which he is purposely using that messiness to make us uncomfortable as an audience, because he very much wants that discomfort to force you to really sit and think about the message that he's conveying and about your place in that where that message lands. And my God, I texted you, Justice, yesterday after I finished it. It was like, hey, fair warning. This movie's a lot. You're probably going to feel very, very uncomfortable.
You sent me that text as I was wrapping up watching Network. So I had already had a couple drinks, and I was watching Network, and I was having my mind fucking exploded. And then you were like, hey, I think this movie's a lot, which is interesting coming from you because things that are a lot, you know my tolerance for pretty much anything.
Uh-huh.
And you're like, I think this is a lot. So kind of just like go into that knowing that. There were multiple scenes where I'm like, oh, okay. Sure. This is a lot. And, especially, as we've mentioned this multiple times. Again, if you do not know this, I am white. So, like, as a white person watching this film, there's a lot. There's a lot.
Yeah, it is a movie, and again, like, this is not surprising for a Spike Lee film, but, like, I think it's, like, maybe 5 minutes into the movie, and you are assaulted with a bunch of white characters using the N-word liberally.
Liberally. Everywhere. The "I'm blacker than you" thing.
Oh my God.
Like, there's a lot.
Dimwitty, the who's the manager in this movie of over our main character,
the network vice president or whatever.
Yes. Whoo boy. Just like a character built to make you feel like
icky. Yeah, it's an icky character and done incredibly effectively, especially at the end of the movie when he's in blackface. It is,
oh my God,
it is like nails it on the head of like, oh no, I'm married to a black woman and I have biracial children.
Whew.
And there he is in blackface at the end of the film, and like, oh my God,
yelling at the one of our black like main characters who is like attempting to push. We'll get into it, but it's, folks, it is not a super comfortable thing to watch.
Yeah. So, our recommended viewing order of how to watch and how we're going to talk about these movies. First off, stop what you're doing right now. Are you driving a car? Pull off onto the side of the road. Are you like working or, accomplishing a task of some great import? Great news. Stop whatever you're doing and go watch the movie Network right now. Right now.
Yeah.
And then we're just going to assume for the rest of the podcast that you have seen the movie Network.
Yep. Because
we both watched Network, and I think both of our minds, as I said earlier, were absolutely fucking smashed to smithereens.
Turns out, A, pretty good movie. B, holy crap, does it have so many like important things to say about what's happening right now? Because it turns out things haven't changed since 1976.
Not only that, but specifically coming off of Elite capture.
Oh my God.
And like the weaponizing identity politics and all that shit. Like, oh boy. So go watch Network. So we're gonna assume, as of right now, you've seen Network. Congratulations, you've been baptized.
Great.
We love you for it.
You did it.
So Spike Lee also has watched Network, and Network is a thing that once you have it in your vocabulary, you can kind of see it everywhere. There's plenty of Simpsons parodies. There's there's stuff everywhere about like what Network is as a film, and you can see
you have absolutely heard "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it" like ad nauseum. I am sure.
Yeah, but I can't believe we watched Network or now pre-RoboCop. There's so many things that we have to now go. Now that we are in a post-Network world, which is why we need you to be here with us.
What we're saying is we're probably going to refer to Network again after this podcast on future podcasts.
Yeah, you kind of can't not talk about it, which is weird that it took us forever to watch it, and then it took a Spike Lee movie that came out in the year 2000, which is also visually a very year 2000 movie, where Network has some timeless charm to it that I think Spike Lee, we'll talk about his effectiveness and the way he frames shots and whatever, but Network is so visually gorgeous and stunning.
Yes.
I was literally in awe. Someone asked me if I was okay. I made noises watching Network.
There's a scene where someone will reference Valhalla, and after they do that, then strap in, buckle up. Things are about to get real.
It is one of the most visually. I was in awe. I literally went, oh, and someone went, Are you okay? Are you fine? I was like, yeah, we're good. No, we're just.
Well, and this is very important because I think there is some degree to which that like visual perfection and that pristine nature of Network is something that Spike Lee is pushing back against to some degree in Bamboozled. And I think we're going to talk about the ways in which there's some aspects of that pushback that I think are very effective and work. And there are some aspects that I think both of us found frustrating in ways that we're not entirely sure help to like make the message land better or to deliver what Spike Lee is attempting to deliver.
Yeah.
And I will admit, like, hey, Spike Lee is a great director, clearly knows what he's doing. It is entirely possible that like there is stuff going on there that I personally am not picking up, but we can still discuss the ways in which those frustrations manifested, and I think it's still useful to know the ways in which it doesn't land for us, because I think that still says something and is important to keep in mind.
And to drive it home, kind of the last point with Network, and I'm thinking about it now, is that there are some of the personal stories with Network, especially the midlife crisis dating a younger woman thing, that I actually think are middle-aged man calling her like the Looney Tune generation raised by a TV, and some of the like the generational stuff there doesn't actually work. So
that is the stuff that I found the most. Yes.
Yeah. So like that was the thing of like we've been talking again as we were eating some vegetables upstairs, about like what doesn't work for us for Bamboozled. But yeah, there's some things in Network that are a little as timeless as some of that film I think is. Again, it was 27 years before Bamboozled. This is now 2024, so Bamboozled is 24 years old. So for how timeless some of the points Network eventually makes, there are some things that it stumbles across that I think is similar to what Spike Lee is accomplishing in Bamboozled, that also are kind of just some of the personal stuff, and then some of the character motivations don't really land and work well similarly to how the rest of it with Network,
Yeah, we have two movies where the main focus of the movie is to get across these big ideas, and sometimes the characters are
the ideas.
They are, and they are made to service those ideas versus getting to actually be fully formed people, which is fascinating in that, like, I think both of those movies are dealing with identity in a lot of ways, and part of what I think we have been talking about with identity is the way in which, like we said with the thesis, the ways in which when identity is done poorly, it collapses people to stereotypes, makes them ideas, and does not allow them to be fully formed people. Yeah. So I think both of those movies are playing in that space, and they have taken the approach of, yes, we are going to go full throttle into collapsing these people into stereotypes and ideas, and we're going to push that in your face. In the Network's case, in a very gorgeous, pristine package. In Bamboozled's case, in a very messy, frustrating, and upsetting package. And it is done that way on purpose. And
it is visually displeasing.
It is. Absolutely. And a lot of that is on purpose.
Yeah. Some of it's not.
Yeah, some of
it's not on purpose. And let's get some of that out of the way now.
Yeah.
So Bamboozled is a film. If you've never seen Network, then if you've seen Network, you'll get some of this stuff. If you've never seen any of these movies, Bamboozled is a movie. It is about a what is he? He's a creative writer.
He's a creative director.
Yeah.
It's CNS, I think, is the network.
Yeah. All of them deal with an imaginary fourth network from the big three. He is there to deliver television, not just about the Black experience. He's kind of just writing TV shows that, also are... I think they go into some of the shows that he's written, and they're like, this is just kind of normal. Why is it not more Black?
It's the middle class experience. The Brown Nosed Jones Show is one of the titles that we get, that he's talking with his assistant Sloan, and she's like, I thought that show was great. I don't know why they didn't pick it up. And like, it's largely his senior executive Dimwitty is like, the Cosbys and the Huxtables, like, they did that, and like, that's great, but that's not the Black experience. Right. We want... Black people can tell us what's hip. Black people can tell us what's cool. And Delacroix, you're not giving me that. You're giving me Brown-Nosed Jones. Right. And so, like, it is very much like no, we want the Black experience, but we actually want a specific Black experience, because there is a stereotype at play here, and if it doesn't fit the stereotype, then it doesn't count as Black.
Yeah. And Delacroix, who is our main character... This is some of the stuff where I'm not happy with a lot of the choices that are made. Is we start the movie with Delacroix at home the TV is off and it just says "Feed the Idiot Box"
Mm-hmm.
on top of the television. He works in TV, and then we do this shot that is Delacroix is played by
Damon Wayans.
Yep, and you might know him from Major Pain. If you need to place him, if you need to know who we're talking about, and he does this weird fucking accent through the whole movie, and it's on purpose. But he does this accent through the whole movie, and he lives in an actual clock tower.
Mm-hmm.
And they do this shot where it's him standing it's him standing on something so that we can like get his apartment view.
Yeah,
and I fucking hate it. I hate it so much, and I found a lot of that when we talked earlier. About how I think this movie is kind of a fisheye lens,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a bunch of stuff around the edges that is painted over with Vaseline to kind of get you that thing, and it's kind of murky, and some of the stuff doesn't make a lot of sense. And that scene as like a visual draw into the movie is I thought abysmal. Like we do understand who Delacroix is through that thing, but we could have done that in the movie instead of this weird narration. We get his point of view and his narration through a lot of the film. And if you've ever seen the narrated cut of Blade Runner, it's about as necessary as the narrated cut of Blade Runner. At least that was my takeaway from.
Yeah, I found a lot of the narration frustrating as well, and I don't know. Now that I've watched Network and have watched this once already, I'm curious to. I don't know that I will watch this movie again because it is a lot, but part of me does kind of want to watch it again, knowing what I know now and kind of like keeping an eye on these sorts of things, because we talked a little bit before recording about how Spike Lee is very clearly making conscious decisions to make some of these shots bad. And it's difficult for me to know which of these choices are specifically him saying, I want you to be uncomfortable here and I want you to be having a bad time. And which of these choices are, Justice, you brought up that it was a style of filmmaking that was very prevalent in the 2000s. And then The Matrix came out. And then movie making changed. And we don't make movies the same way ever since.
Movies have never looked the same post The Matrix.
Yes.
There's 1,000 things that you could look at that will tell you this. There's a whole.
Yes.
I think there's a book about it.
Yes,
right?
absolutely. And like beyond just action movies, which are very clearly like affected by that. But yes, everything was different after that. And this movie, again, it's hard to know which of these choices are meant to throw you off balance. And I think some of the choices clearly are meant to do that and do that very effectively. But this initial shot, I didn't hate it as much as you did, but it didn't really like do anything for me. Like it didn't give me anything interesting about Dela's character in a way that I would have expected from that opening shot.
I will tell you this, for a movie that is 2 hours long, there are scenes in it that Network is also 2 hours long.
Yes.
Both of these movies are almost nearly the same runtime.
Yeah.
It's almost
each of them a little bit over 2.
Yeah. It's almost like Spike Lee knew what he was doing.
Man, weird.
So for that runtime, to build in this personal character development is good. I love that for a film. This is not the way that I would want to see that done. There are so many other things that he does well in this movie. And this intro feels like, the movie where the guy's in the shower and he does the whole fucking song to kind of like introduce you to him as a character. I would have to play it for you. It's like a meme on the internet. But it felt so like, no, we need to ground you with this character because he's our lens through the rest of the movie. That didn't feel necessary because we have so many interesting angles to take through the film that I also don't necessarily know if Delacroix is our primary protagonist, but the film does definitely set him up that way, that we kind of have to deal with him that way.
Well, and so here is where I promised Justice that this was going to happen. This is where we bring up Bertolt Brecht.
Yeah,
So
you did.
I
You said,
did.
"Hey,
I'm like, hey, we're probably going to talk about Brecht today. So I think it is very clear with this movie that Spike Lee is doing what Bertolt Brecht would refer to as, and what Bertolt Brecht did in a lot of his plays, which is called alienation. So, and this is a pleasant version of this would be Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where you get characters that are horrible people that you're not meant to identify with personally. You watch them do terrible things, and sometimes those terrible things are funny, like in Always Sunny. And you're like, that's funny, but oh my God, those people are the worst. Here, it's not funny. You're not supposed to like anybody in this movie, save maybe Sloane, although that's complicated for reasons we'll get into later. But you are not supposed to like Delacroix. Like he is supposed to be frustrating and not somebody that you identify with. He is kind of a terrible person. He makes poor decisions throughout the entire movie, and those poor decisions are used as a frame to help to point out the ways in which minstrelsy is perhaps not great, and why if you embrace that or attempt to do that modern day, it's going to go poorly for you. So I think part of what's tricky with this initial shot is you're not supposed to like him. So is a disorienting shot that's not great meant to immediately throw you into that alienation? And this is one of the areas where I don't know that it lands, because I think there's other stuff that happens, like filmography-wise, that does this very effectively through the movie. I don't know that this initial shot, I don't think it does it.
yeah, it might not deserve my ire in the way that I have explained it, but it seemed so strange.
Well, and I think one of the things that this initial opening shot does do is it provides a contrast to, so after we spend this initial like moment with our main character, Delacroix, we get to see these two street performers. And this is, you will see throughout this movie, there are scenes that are shot like the camera is steady. It's very clearly on a tripod or mounted. You have things framed. You will switch between edits the way that you expect in like big budget, like TV shows. And then you go down to the street and you see these two street performers, and you have a grainy, shaky, it seems like maybe even a handheld cam. And you're going to have this juxtaposition constantly throughout this movie of these shots that are more stereotypical movie shots, and then these shots that are messy and and generally speaking, when you see the messy shots, you're actually seeing people being human beings versus the pristine TV-like shots. And I think some of what might be frustrating, and I don't know how much of this is done effectively, Spike Lee wants this to feel like a TV show. And so I think, Justice, you even pointed out when we were talking earlier that a lot of this feels to you like a TV show in a way that you're like, I don't know that I like it.
And I mean visually,
yes,
right? Like,
yes.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing. There are shots in this that characters are framed. The camera is at an angle, like, right? Like, and it's supposed to drive us. It's supposed to like create some uncomfortable emotions and feelings, right? We're not seeing people straight on and whatever, but their whole head is most of the shot, and also it's at an angle, and everything feels strange. And I don't mean strange as like it's driving home an emotion of strangeness. I just mean it's unpleasant to look at. And part of that is, and this is why I was talking about like the visual language that I consume movies in, it definitely does not adhere to a lot of that stuff. It felt very different, and especially because he then centers stuff very traditionally, especially whenever we get back to the minstrel show, and everything there is very comfortable. And that's on purpose. Obviously. But I guess the thing of the visual style he uses when we're not dealing with that high level of production, I don't think, for me, it was not effective to drive home that point that these are when they're people and when they're not people. It kind of just felt weird. Like, it just didn't feel good between the two things. It was hard for me to I didn't go along with that on that journey with
Right.
him the way that I think he wanted me to.
Well, and this is one of the things that makes me curious, and who knows if I will rewatch this, but part of a rewatch would be to view this through the lens of how much of those shots that feel uncomfortable are shot in the way of like a TV movie or like a TV show. Because like then I think you're doing a very specific, and I think that might be what's happening there, but I don't know. And I don't think it does a lot to hammer home some of the points that he wants to make in this movie. So
yeah, it's just like I said, it feels like some of the Vaseline on the fisheye lens that
Yeah.
we're kind of just, it's blurry. It's not, and it's blurry on purpose. It's
Yeah.
grainy on purpose, but it doesn't really help emphasize. For a 2-hour runtime, I would hope that everything's kind of emphasizing the points, and some of the visual language he uses didn't work for me to emphasize where he is incredibly effective in other parts of the film, especially because I think from a writing perspective and an acting perspective that those scenes being ugly are also not always acted great, to a point that I don't know if there was a script for some of them. If it was just your two characters know each other this way, we're going to turn on a camera and another camera, and we're going to kind of cut between two shots sometimes whenever you guys talk, and that's it. So it felt kind of loose in a way that I wouldn't expect for a movie of this runtime that isn't loose in the same way whenever we're driving home the actual points of the film. Again, subtlety is for cowards.
Yeah.
So obviously get right the thing you need to get right, but it felt strange. And if that's the point, great. Hey, he did it. But some of it's so, like I said, for it to be effective, I wish it would have been effective in those other scenes as well. And I think that the character part is the part, especially as we get towards the end of the movie and some characters make some questionable decisions. We know how we get there, but it doesn't work, or parts of it didn't work for me with some characters as we get towards the end. And
yeah,
like
some of them become victims to the stereotype in a way that you're like, okay, I see what you're doing here. And some of them become victims to, I don't even know what.
Apparently we wrote the movie this way, and the
Yeah.
movie's going to end this way.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean. Like for how challenging the rest of it is from the way the movie is written and how much of it doesn't work. That's why I kind of question, well, if these were the purposeful decisions that were being made at the time, it still kind of feels weird. And I didn't leave it happy that the other parts of the movie are in the movie. Like that's the part that's like, it feels excessive.
Well, and so I think this might be a case where, and like this is a movie that I think is probably going to continue to like sort of like expand as I think about it more, because it's a fascinating thing. It's a fascinating object.
You did the same thing with The Boy and the Heron. Now that we're not talking about it anymore.
Yeah.
Like you've said multiple times later, I think I like that movie more.
I have, yes, I absolutely have. It turns out I really do kind of want to see the English dub now, because I'm like, I think maybe that's a good movie. Like it is a good movie. It's definitely, but like I think it's maybe a better movie than I even gave it credit for. But that's a different thing. Yeah. So I think that one of the things that might be happening here is it's possible that Spike Lee is being subtle here, but the fact that he is not subtle anywhere else means that it gets totally lost. So I think there's a lot that could be deconstructed here, and it's fascinating because like I don't know if that means it's good or it works. I don't know.
That's where I want to end my point on it. Is that I think for how effective the rest of the movie is, I wish those parts were more effective.
Yeah.
Because that was a journey, a visual journey, and again, because of some of the acting and some of the choices, the other choices that are made in those same scenes, that it didn't work for me. That was a harder journey to kind of latch onto, and some of the stuff that he's trying to accomplish didn't land, especially as we get into later parts of it that are also more challenging because we spent more time with the characters. Yeah. It's just odd.
Yeah. Well, so I think it makes sense then to talk a bit more about like what the parts of the movie that do work, and sort of the thing that is really the animating focus of the movie. So Spike Lee definitely wanted to interrogate the idea of the minstrel show. And if you are not familiar with the minstrel show and black minstrelsy,
You should watch this movie.
You can just watch this movie and
Yeah.
you'll know. You'll have it. Good news.
So
Spike Lee does a great job.
Watch Network, watch this movie, and then you'll understand.
Yes, absolutely. But just in case, for whatever reason, you don't go out and watch this, to give you some idea of what the Black Minstrel Show entails and like the place that it has had in history, for a very long time in the past, you had Black folks who got jobs in entertainment specifically to be the laughingstock. And often, and this movie does, it is very clear that Spike Lee did a lot of research and very like lovingly renders this. Like you get a scene where they talk about how you actually do blackface, because Black people would do blackface for Black minstrel shows because they wanted to make the blackness pop even more, make it even clearer that, oh, this is the other, this is different. And to make it pop even more, well, Black folks have big lips, so we've got to make those lips bright red. So we're going to put lipstick around the lips to accentuate them and make them even larger. And we are going to turn Black people into a caricature, and then we're going to have them do stupid and ridiculous things for our amusement. We're going to have them fall over. We're going to have them sing stupid songs. We're going to have them call women mammies, and we're going to have them, running around with their pants falling down and like people shooting at their feet and them dancing. Like it is very much about Black people as entertainment and not as humans. And Spike Lee does such a beautiful job of like really hammering home the historical ways that this worked, and does a really wonderful job of making a through line from the historical to today and going, hey, this is still happening. This is still a thing. Black people are still used as a source of entertainment and not seen as full people. And this movie is very much about what does that mean and what do we do about that?
So Delacroix goes in and writes this minstrel show as the new minstrel show of the millennium or something along those lines, and delivers to his network executive, who claims to be more Black than Delacroix because he has married a Black woman and has biracial kids.
And also knows who Jackie Robinson and
Michael Jordan. Yeah. Like
he knows sports people.
He knows sports Black people.
Yeah.
So that makes him more Black. They develop this show. It's going to be a minstrel show. And, the motivation for Delacroix here is, one, he tells his assistant that they're going to make a show so that he can get fired so he can pay his mortgage.
At this point, Dimwitty, the executive, has said, I need you to give me the Black experience. You keep giving me all this like middle class, like nonsense. No, I want the Black experience. Give me the Black experience. So finally, Delacroix is like, fine. You want the Black experience? I'll give you the Black experience. I'm going to give you a 2000 minstrel show. I'm going to give you the Black. And he's like, there's no way they'll greenlight this. Mm-hmm. This is going to be so offensive and so ridiculous. They'll never sign off on it.
And as movies happen, or they signed off on it, right?
Surprise.
So we get through the minstrel show, and we get to, as Chris pointed out, Sloane, who is Jada Pinkett Smith, runs through all of these historical facts about, hey, minstrel shows were put on with Black people. They were, blackface was a thing that Black people would do, not just white people, to pop on camera, to add to what this is. And they specifically always do blackface the same way, which they burn corks and alcohol and then water it down into a paste, and they smear that on their face, and
after
it's
you
done.
put the cocoa butter on.
Yep. And they do that they do all that stuff in detail. Eventually, Delacroix's office starts to fill up with more and more memorabilia, is a way that
it's really like blackface memorabilia.
Yeah.
It's these used to be very, very popular, upsettingly so, like these tiny little like trinkets. So Eventually, we will get a money bank that is a blackface money bank where you put a quarter on the hand and it throws the quarter into the mouth and the eyes shut and it's a whole and the ears flip.
Yep. It's a whole thing. So he continues to accumulate all this stuff. The idea being that it was supposed to be satire. Right.
Yes.
That's the thing. And that's what really ties this really well to American Fiction, is that the point was no one's going to greenlight this, and it's going to be satire. No one should consume this. This is an evil thing to do. And obviously Delacroix loses the thread and starts to invest himself into the show. And there are scenes that pop that kind of sell you on why the show might be working. And there's stuff in how Spike Lee frames and how gorgeous the minstrel show stuff is to shoot. And it is so beautifully well done and delivered that that's the stuff that whenever you're like, I think you're going to be uncomfortable about it. Yeah. That was the stuff that I was like,
yeah,
like
that is the stuff.
It works what I meant. Well.
Yes. Well, and it specifically is attempting to, because what Spike Lee wants to do is Spike does not want to let you off the hook. Like it would be a different kind of movie if the minstrel show was filmed poorly and the writing on it was very clearly bad. And because the writing is actually kind of good, you are thrust into a situation where you're like, some of these jokes are funny.
The chemistry between the two characters.
Absolutely. And the choreography for the dancing is good. The music is interesting. It makes it just good enough that you have to reckon with the fact that there are parts of this terrible thing that you might actually be enjoying, and Spike Lee wants you to really think about that.
And it's one of the most earned things that the movie does, because like we also get a couple camera pans to the crowd where it shows like the crowd reaction, and the crowd is very uncomfortable throughout a lot of this stuff. But it kind of Spike Lee again
initially,
but Spike Lee eventually helps sell you on, hey, there's something here. These two characters that they've picked to be the leads, they are two guys from the street. They're the tap dancers, the tap dancer and his buddy at the beginning that are trying to get money outside of the studio before. Before they get the job working the show, and they're just trying to get paid because they're broke. And they do this whole scene that is really actually good, while also incredibly challenging.
The entire time you're like, ooh.
It's odd, but it's not good, but also it's funny. And there are two actors that act this scene super well, where they're
you've got Savion Glover as originally Man Ray, but becomes known as Man-Tan because of that is the historical minstrelsy stuff. But like an amazing tap dancer and great chemistry, and then Tommy Davidson as Womack, and the two of them together are just, oh man, what Womack is so good. Went on stage. Like, oh man.
Yeah, they do this whole comedy bit that is them robbing chickens from a hen house. As minstrel shows are wont to do.
And it's a whole thing about like trying to get a gift for his girlfriend, and like it's so good, and like they're completing each other's thoughts the entire time. Like and then like, oh god,
and then all of a sudden like you can lose yourself in the scene watching them perform, and then you flip the switch back on, and it's so like that scene sells the whole fucking movie to me. He flips the switch back on of, oh, and here comes the white guy with the gun, and now we're gonna pretend to be chickens. And oh my god, it's so good because you lose yourself so deep into how funny they are.
Yeah,
and how interesting the chemistry is, while they're wearing blackface in a hen house, trying to steal shit. And a white guy with a shotgun shows up and starts shooting at their feet eventually. And then,
which is even more upsetting based on what happens later on.
Based on what happens to our one of our main characters. But it is so good. It's so effective. And it's my challenge with some of the other parts of the film is this scene is so goddamn effective. Like, this is mind-boggling good of how it's believable, how you can see it. He does a couple camera, like there's some camera edits where they go back to the crowd.
Yeah.
And there's a diverse crowd there. Black people are laughing along with it.
Yep.
It's not just white people doing this. There are other black people who are, giant question marks.
Having a time. Not a good time. A time.
And there's so much effectiveness on how that scene works. And then, the eventual carry off into, we got to get back to what is the name of the band? The Arizona Porch Monkeys?
Yeah.
No.
Yep.
Everything hurts. The whole thing.
Yeah, it's real bad. It's real bad. And like you get it's so interesting. You get a lot of that also with the interplay outside of the show between Delacroix and Sloane when they're talking about some of this, because initially Delacroix keeps suggesting that, well, I'm going to pitch this and it's terrible. It's a travesty. They'll never pick it up. I think this is horrible. But the further along you go, the clearer and clearer it is that Delacroix has a questionable amount of commitment to that moral stance, whereas Sloane, his assistant, she seems to firmly have a grasp of what's going on here. And there are scenes that she too is like, well, that's kind of funny. And throughout this entire section, she is a character who you look at and you're like, you seem like you are viewing this with clear eyes. You are like, this minstrelsy is bad. We should keep that in mind. Some of these jokes are funny. Some of this writing is good, but also context. It's still a minstrel show. That's still bad. And she keeps attempting to remind Delacroix of this. And the further along we go in the movie, the less and less he seems apt to pay attention to her attempts to bring him back on course.
Yeah. I honestly could not tell you how many movies that I've seen Jada Pinkett Smith in, but she is a grounding force throughout an entire movie that is kind of structured around being unbelievable. She's really, really great in this film to drive home that, hey, someone has to have a realm of sanity here, right? Like someone has to be a moral compass throughout the rest of this movie, because it kind of doesn't work without one.
Yeah.
If everyone's the worst all the time, where are we supposed to latch onto as a bastion of sanity? Right. And she is that, and she delivers that stuff really, really well in a way that kind of shows you how we get to some of the later parts of the film, why things happen the way that they do in the early parts of the film, how fucking stupid this whole thing is in the first place. She's the only one in this room going, this is terrible.
She is.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're like, no, they definitely won't do this on a plantation. And then the white executive's like, you're right, we'll do it on a water.
not the executive. He's like, no, let's do it on a plantation. And Delacroix's like, no, let's do it in a watermelon patch. And Sloane is like, are you kidding me? Seriously?
Yeah, there's so much of it that's a lot.
Yeah.
As the movie continues to go on, we deal more with, outside of the minstrel scenes that are, like I said, gorgeous. They're terrifyingly gorgeous.
Yeah.
We get to one of the later ones where the whole crowd is in blackface and white gloves, and it is a lot, and it's so well done.
Yeah, there's audience work that happens by this character named Honeycutt, who you get to see earlier on. And that's another situation where, like, Honeycutt does an audition where you're like, some of this is not bad. Like, Honeycutt is doing a thing and, like, that thing. And, like, again, you get Sloane being like, you know, like, Honeycutt does this whole, like, Hamlet thing that's, like, it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny. And, like, Sloane's like, yeah, it's kind of funny. It's kind of funny. And then you get Honeycutt in blackface, just walking up to members of the crowd being like, hey, tell me, are you an N-word? Are you? And it's just like this white grandma, and like it's like, yeah, I am.
Yeah.
Oh no.
It's so much, but it does this thing. This is where Spike Lee, I think, really does a great job of muddying the waters on, like, it would be easy if this was evil inherently, but he builds a moral gray area of a compelling argument. We do this also when we go see Delacroix's dad perform stand-up, where we see, like,
Junebug.
Yeah, Junebug. And some of this moral gray, what do you have to do with white people? Oh, you keep them laughing, and then they keep showing up. And is that just... But, you know, they build this really visually stunning... Both characters, whenever Junebug's doing it in the comedy club, it's visually pleasing. Everything's very centered.
Yeah, that is shot in a way where, like, you get, like, Junebug, like, slightly off center, and, like, you get to, like, watch that set.
Yep, it feels like you sitting down and watching it, which is it's gorgeously done. Same thing with Honeycutt. Whenever you see Honeycutt the first time, it's
100%.
It very much feels like you're seeing something, and there's something to the performance of it. And Spike Lee really drives home that performance of it aspect of both of these characters and how they are similar and how they're not similar, but like kind of the same performance aspect of both of these characters. And it's nice. It's nice to look at.
Yeah, well, and it's fast. So part of the way that Junebug functions in this movie, which played by Paul Mooney, by the way, which, if you are not familiar, very funny.
Yeah,
Paul Mooney is
super
very funny. Yeah, so you get Dela showing up to see the show, to, like, say hello to his father and to like have a conversation with him. And when they're having this conversation, Junebug's like, hey, the first thing that we have to do is entertain. But the thing is that while Junebug is saying you have to entertain the white folks, he is specifically chosen to play black. Like he says, I'm playing black clubs. I am doing these jokes for black people. It's like, white people don't want to hear him, so, you know, what are you going to do? But, like, he is, in a very fascinating way, he is performing, but he is specifically performing for black people. Whereas Delacroix,
and Honeycutt, you know, like that's part of the framing there is Honeycutt is performing for white people.
Yes, and Delacroix is trying to pretend, though, that he's not performing. And, like, this is we talked about this before recording. Just you're like, man, like, some of the Delacroix stuff is really frustrating. Like, it's the accent and the whole thing. It's like, you know, he is fake from the start because he has been performing for white people before we even see him. Like, one of the things that Junebug said, one of the first things that Junebug says to him when he stops in backstage to say hello is, why do you talk like that? Why do you affect... Because, like, David Wayans is putting on this, like, weird, like, pretentious accent, like, vaguely French-ish, kind of. Like, it's weird.
Yeah, it's not...
It's weird. It's like...
It's also not done well on purpose in a way that's like, huh, okay.
Yes. And so he is doing that because he thinks that is going to ingratiate him with white people. He thinks that is going to allow him to not be one of the black people that doesn't get to be part of the club. We talked about this in our last episode with the Black Bourgeois, where it's like, hey, all I need to do is act white enough, and then I get to be in the club. It's like, no, you don't. You will never get to be in the club. Delacroix, you can... Who, by the way, that's not his name. It's like, you will never be in the club. You can make a fake name in this weird accent as much as you want, but white people are never going to respect you. And the fact that your boss, Dimwitty, keeps telling you to do black stuff should be the clue. But he wants that white praise so much. And his dad is like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep doing my thing. And if that means I'm just performing for black crowds, then that means I'm just performing for black crowds. So he's this fascinating juxtaposition of our main character where it's like, this is who you could have been if you didn't decide like to go down the path of appeasing white folks.
We still have not even talked about the actor formerly known as Mos Def.
Yes.
Doing the whole gang. What is it? Most.
Yeah. Yasim Def is a big black AF.
Yeah, big black AF.
Black without a C.
Yep.
Yes. Part of the Mau Maus.
Part of the Mau Maus, which are a revolutionary group. Again, this is one of the things that I think really watching Network really helps of like why this subplot is in the film. Because it makes more sense with Network as part of the media literacy.
Yeah, this is your ecumenical liberation front from Network. That's what the Mau Maus are.
Yep. And it's the one guy is 1/16th.
1/16th. Yeah.
Yeah. He's the only guy who lives whenever they all get shot by the cops.
Like, why didn't you shoot me? Why didn't you shoot me? One drop. It's that scene is that scene's pretty good.
Yeah, that scene's good. And they do a lot of like they're this revolutionary force. They're a gang. It's also the sister or Sloane is his sister.
Sloane is his sister. Yep.
Which that part of it kind of feels like if you're going to tack on this subplot and like not know how to do it and you need it to feel grounded, that's a way to do it.
Yeah, they do that for reasons that then when we get to the end make Sloane a worse character. So the whole thing there, I agree, like it's not good.
And those are also the worst acted scenes in the entire movie is Sloane talking to Black AF.
Yeah.
Like those are the worst scenes. Specifically in the entire film. That is the one where I was like, is there a writer?
Well, I will say, I think that there is one scene worse than that scene.
Well, I just meant from an acting perspective.
Okay. Yeah, no, you're right. You know what? Honestly, you're right. Jada Pinkett Smith delivers on that second scene despite the fact that it is stupid.
It's badly written. The last scene of the movie is badly written.
Yes.
The scenes between those two characters are just poorly acted, which is crazy. Because both of those are good actors.
Yes. Well, and I think this is a situation where you very much see the ways in which making these characters archetypes, and part of the problem is that Sloane is largely not an archetype in this movie, and she is perhaps the only character who mostly gets to not be an archetype. Everybody else is an archetype, and they don't get to be a person. And so when you have Sloane rubbing up against Dela, that works because that's a grounding force, whereas when you have Sloane rubbing up against Big Black AF, it doesn't work because she's not the grounding character there. Like, she's not really like providing any sort of like way to like understand the ways like the fact that Big Black AF is named that and is a revolutionary is silly and ridiculous, but we don't get that from that scene.
Yeah.
And there is a way in which you could have done that because we see her do that with Delacroix. Mm-hmm. We don't get it here.
And it does not help that that's, again, the worst acted scene in the entire movie. That's where, I think some of the scenes between some of the characters were literally, here's your relationship with you two, turn on the camera and film it. It feels awkward and stunted, again, in a way that both of these actors, who I know are good, no part of it really helps. It doesn't help. It's not a compelling texture to have into the movie.
Yeah.
It doesn't pay off well at the end, so it makes me hate it more.
Yep. This is very much like in Network. You get Laureen Green very early on in the movie. She's your revolutionary, or the connection that you get to the revolutionaries. Like, that's supposed to be that scene. And it works really well in Network, and it does not work here. But it is here because Spike Lee needs to set up the same sort of thing for the Mau Mau's that you get from the Liberation Front in Network. So it's there for plot reasons, but it doesn't really feel like it works.
Yeah. So we're getting a little long here. So
We are, yeah.
And I don't have a problem with that, but maybe you, the listener at home, do. But let's kind of get towards the end of the movie and kind of where we finish with it. So minstrel show goes on. People have a crisis of faith that the minstrel show might be a bad idea.
Yeah, so like let's do like a quick rundown of kind of like the progression of what happens with this minstrel show. So initially, you get the pitch where Delacroix and Sloan are like, they're never gonna greenlight this because this is the most racist nonsense that anybody has ever pitched. And then the network goes, we love this. This is great. We're gonna option 12 episodes. Let's go.
We're gonna hire a media person.
Yes. So they hire a media person because, of course, there's protesting. There are a bunch of people, including Al Sharpton and Al Cochran, who are like, hey, this is bad, actually. Although we do get Bill Clinton chuckling along because he's our first black president. Yeah. So you have initially this backlash against the show and we get Myrna, the network's hired like, hey, I'm the fixer. I will help you to navigate this media like nonsense. And she's like, hey, I've got a couple of points that will help us to like work through this. First of all, hire some black folks and have them on set, and then we'll be fine. It's like, and then tell people to lighten up. Why are you being so weird about this? It's not a big deal. It's just a minstrel show. We're all just having fun here. And then you get like, and hey, who even defines what's black? Like, hey, is that for you to decide? No, this is as black as anything else. And then it's satire. Calm down. This is commentary. And then finally, last but not least, it's a joke. And if you can't take it, it's on you.
And nothing's changed.
Yeah, and by the way, her parents marched in Selma, so like she's cool with black people.
Doesn't she have a degree in African studies?
She does.
Yeah.
In Negroism.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, and she does say to Delacroix and Sloan, hey, it can't be racist because you're black and you made it, which that's not how that works. So we get that, and so clearly the network is all in. They're gonna like we've lined up the defense so that if people are upset, which they clearly are, we're gonna push back against that, and then we get award season because you know what? This show's a critical darling. You've presented the black experience, Delacroix. You've really like done something here. And then we get like a montage of Delacroix accepting awards, and it is so sad to watch. He is the most,
but it's also his fantasy. It's not real.
Yes.
Yeah. So that makes it worse.
Yes. Yes. And he says, I'm going to be the grateful Negro. That is the role that I'm going to play. I'm going to show them so much respect. It's like, and it is between the weird voice that he's affecting, between the way he's changed his name, between this, I'm going to be the grateful Negro. It is so clear that this is a man who just wants white people to like him so bad. So bad. And so he doesn't care what he is doing to the black identity, what he's doing to stereotypes, whether he's reinforcing them or not, doesn't matter. I just need the white people to like me. That's all I care about.
His mom calls him and says,
she's got some words.
She says the equivalent of like, I'm happy you're happy, but also I can't believe you would fucking do this. Like I'm so disappointed. Like I'm happy that everything's great. I'm so disappointed in you.
Yep.
We get through that, the minstrel show, and then like Network, we have to end with someone getting shot.
Yeah, although I very quickly need to point out, Delacroix does get called the Clarence Thomas of television, which, mwah.
Yeah. So we know because we've seen Network that probably someone's going to die, and that someone's going to die on air or as part of the filming.
And we do get a bit of a foreshadowing here where Delacroix gives our lead in the minstrel show, Manny, he gives him a pair of Bojangles tap shoes and says he died dancing on his feet. And Manny's like, man, I hope I don't go out this way. And as the viewer, you're like, I think this is probably gonna end poorly for you, Manny.
Yeah. And he has all the characters that are working on the show except for Honeycutt all start having crises of faith, and they're all like turning on the show. So people start leaving.
Yeah, Womack leaves immediately. Sloane gets fired because she's like, this is nonsense.
So he goes and he refuses to show up on stage. That's the scene where the network executive's in blackface and has to go onto the stage and be like, no, we're gonna get the show back on.
Well, and this is one of the scenes where it is incredibly important for you to have watched Network, because Manny shows up on stage without blackface. He starts tap dancing and he goes, I want you to all go to your windows and I want you to yell out, I am not an N-word. So it is very much
and that's the second time that he gives that speech, because he did it once earlier where he says, I am.
Yes.
Yeah, I want you to yell at your window, I am an N-word.
Yes. Yeah. And important to also know, one of Howard Beale in Network's whole things when he's giving those speeches is he collapses. And Manny also collapses after. So when he does that, boom, collapses on stage.
Yeah. And it's so great. Again, having watched Network, none of that makes sense if you because you did it opposite. You did. You watched that first, and you're like, oh, well, okay.
Like, oh, that's good.
And then you saw Network, and you're like, oh, okay. So he has a crisis of faith. He leaves the show, and then he gets kidnapped by the Mau Mau. They make him do the dance of death, where they're gonna do the gag where you dance while getting shot at, and
they're gonna live stream it on the internet.
Live stream it on the internet in the year 2000 on the internet.
But no one has the internet in the year 2000.
I find it so funny that they email CNN. we send an email to CNN, and they're gonna broadcast this on their homepage.
It's amazing. Yeah.
And there's a shitty little Internet Explorer browser, and they're gonna make him do the dance of death, and then they do this weird scene where do they take him out and do stuff with him? I couldn't understand what the fuck was going on.
So they initially have him tied up, and
I didn't know. Is it like a fantasy, or is it real that they eventually they take him out and do stuff with him?
So they tie him up, they yell at him a bunch. That none of that's a fantasy, and then they do the live stream where he dances and they shoot at him, and then they shoot him.
Yeah, and then they shoot him. But there were scenes in between that where they have him outside and stuff, and they're hanging out, and that's the part where I'm like, what the fuck's going on here?
I will say, so we talked about this earlier, where. Hey.
We might have watched different edits of the film.
Yes.
Also, I stole mine off the internet. And there are some things in there that I'm like, I don't know what the fuck.
Yeah. Don't recall that part.
I swear to God, there's a scene, and it's his character and Mos Def looking in a window for something. And yeah. Mine was a stolen copy of the version off the Criterion Collection.
I wonder if there's some director's cut stuff going on.
I don't know.
Who could say? But the important thing to note here is Manny gets shot a lot.
Yeah, a lot while tap dancing, and then the Mau Mau go to leave, and then
also important. When the Mau Mau are deciding to do this, they do make a Frantz Fanon reference. So just got to make sure that tying this back to the last podcast and making sure that
every time I see baseball, every time you see Frantz Fanon.
Exactly.
Same thing. So yeah, then the cops show up after the shooting. They find them immediately after the shooting, apparently, and then they shoot all of them except for 1/16 Black.
Yep.
While this is going on, the live stream is happening. Delacroix is in his office, surrounded by all this memorabilia that he's collected as he's been running the minstrel show and all this legacy minstrel show stuff.
The blackface piggy bank is haunted now.
Yeah, it's haunted. Which I don't like that part at all. It doesn't work. I don't as things that in the movie are less effective, that is another one of the things that I think is less effective. I also think the computer animation stuff that happens is also not very effective, which is fine. It doesn't have to be, but it's just weird that it's there. But or to do more of it. I think the other thing would have been to embrace like the year 2000s-ness of that computer generated weirdness, like a racist episode of Reboot.
Oh man, remember when my man Enzo got jacked? A lot of people
you remember a lot more of Reboot than I do.
Well, because some people found out things about themselves and so showed back up and maybe looked different.
Yeah. And also, Reboot's one of those shows that like they can't find all of it anymore,
which is wild.
Different thing.
Yeah. Well,
anyway,
maybe someday, but
a different. Yeah. So anyway, this is the part of the movie that I think we have the most issues with.
Yes.
Delacroix in his office, and he's watching the execution on his feed the idiot box TV, and the everything's haunted, and he's having his crisis of faith.
Smashes a bunch of these. So you are mentioned, Justice, that he's become surrounded by these like all of these trinkets and all of these like little mementos of blackface and this tiny little. He just smashes them all. Then, what I found one of the most frustrating things in the movie, I've mentioned this repeatedly to you because I'm so frustrated by it. I love Sloane throughout almost all of the movie. I thought that her character was great. Jada Pinkett Smith, amazing, does a great job in almost every single scene she's in. And then she does a great job here. It's just the things that she has to do make no sense.
When you have to sell a scene that sucks, she does a great job of selling a scene that sucks. And this scene is not great. So Delacroix is, sitting in his chair in his office. Sloane comes in with a gun, which does not make sense for her character. And she goes, I got this from my brother. Sure. And then goes to tell Delacroix, hey, I made this video for you earlier about what a minstrel show is. I need you to watch it. And she, does that with the gun. And then he puts the tape, or he goes to get the gun off of her, and instead of that.
So he puts the tape in. The tape goes, and then he's like, Sloane, hey. You don't have to do that. And like walks towards her. She's like, Peerless, because his name is not actually Pierre Delacroix. It is Peerless Dauphin. Like, Peerless, don't make me do this. And then she shoots him in the gut, which makes no sense.
It doesn't make any sense. And then she leaves.
Yes.
And then she goes, oh my God, and then hands him the gun and then walks away.
And then you get a bunch of ridiculous narration from him that is not good.
Again, the narration sucks throughout the entire film, or I think it sucks throughout the entire film. And then the fact that it's used in the last scene to show, like, no, this is the dying thoughts of this man or whatever, doesn't help that the fact that also that scene sucks and it's not written well and acted fine, but it is what it is. And also, Delacroix's in blackface at that point in time, too. We didn't even talk about that. Which, again, makes sense.
It does. It does.
Like,
well, this is very much... Again, these characters have been completely collapsed into stereotype, which a lot of the collapsing makes sense for the message that Spike Lee is attempting to give us. But I think particularly with Sloane, the problem is that she doesn't get effectively collapsed. Like Delacroix, I can accept all of that because he's a terrible character who is one-dimensional on purpose, and him being in blackface, he's been in blackface the entire movie, but just not with the paint on. So putting it on him at the end, fine. You have made it explicit because subtlety is for cowards. So great. Good. Awesome. I get it. But why have you... Sloane being collapsed doesn't work, and that
She's the grounding narrative force, and if the grounding narrative force that he wants to say is that actually the death of this man is important,
Yeah.
It just feels off.
Yeah, and like he quotes some James Baldwin, which I love James Baldwin, so cool. But so like part of the point is like the James Baldwin quote is basically like, hey, you are responsible for your actions in life. Like that's the thing that, and yep, you are responsible for having put this stereotype out into the world and reinforcing negative ideas about black people, and you are dead because of it. And again, subtlety for cowards, great. All right, good. I get it. Great. But the scene could have been more effective than it was.
Yeah. It is the... I think the stuff earlier is more offensive just because it's so poorly acted, but this one's at least acted well. It's just the worst written ending to this movie that it could have had. Knowing that,
Yes.
knowing where we are,
Yes.
did you like the movie? Like, is
difficult.
Is Bamboozled a movie that, one, you've already said that you don't think you would watch it again, or maybe, but maybe not.
Yeah.
It was based on the critic consensus that we found on Rotten Tomato. It was mixed reviews at the time. And then we've watched it now. Would you recommend this movie to other people? Is this something that you think, is there something to Bamboozled now in 2024 that you think is worthwhile for people to come back to also? Like what is it now that we've seen it?
Yes.
What's there?
Fantastic question. So I will say I am glad that I have watched it, despite the fact that it was not pleasant to do that for most of the viewing experience. And I feel like the further away I get from it, the more I'm able to kind of like digest it and to appreciate the things that it is doing. Because you get the visceral reaction is so upsetting and strong that it can be difficult to like parse through the things that the movie is really doing. Talking about it, I think has been good. I think that there are few ways to learn about black minstrelsy better than this movie. And I think that in and of itself is very valuable. I don't know that everybody needs it, but I do think it is good and useful. And I think this is a movie that I would probably recommend to some people, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to everybody. And I will say, I haven't read it, but I'm kind of curious to do so now. There's a film critic named Ashley Clark who has written an entire book about this.
Oh, okay.
And my understanding is, so like Roger Ebert had Ashley on the site and was like, hey, listen to this guy. He knows things. And a lot of that is about deconstructing this film. I think that I'd be curious to read more about that because I think this film is doing interesting and valuable things. It's just very unpleasant, and purposely so. So is it something that we need in 2024? I think yes. But again, I don't know that everybody needs it because we are dealing with a scenario now where identity politics have become incredibly difficult. And I think a lot of people are, and this movie ties into, in the same way that Network does, the ways in which the entertainment industry like really like props up a lot of the worst aspects of some of this kind of stuff. Bamboozled really, really gets at that effectively. And I think now that is happening just as much as ever. So Network and Bamboozled are still worthwhile. Network probably forever, and probably a more enjoyable viewing experience.
A really great movie to watch. Yeah.
But yes, so I think ultimately I would say, yes, it's valuable. Yes, it's worthwhile to watch now. Would I recommend it to everybody? No. But would I recommend it to some people? Yes. Justice, what do you think?
Well, Chris, I'm happy you asked. I don't know if Bamboozled is a movie that I would put on the top of someone's backlog. And what I mean by that is, you're right. It's totally it's an effective and meaningful message to get across. I think as far as like the medium of a movie goes, my issue with Bamboozled has nothing to do with the messaging and has more to do with the movie part of Bamboozled. And I don't like the part around Bamboozled that's the movie. I like the very specific interactions that Spike Lee has with the ideas and how he wants to tell that story around these topics. So I would not necessarily go like, hey, you should go watch Bamboozled. It's just not a thing that I'm going to be thinking about. Maybe I'm wrong. And now 6 months from now, I'll be like, I'm fucking thinking about Bamboozled every day. I don't think that will be true, but and I think it has more to do with the visual medium of films in the year 2000 than it does with the content of the film. And that's the part where I kind of like struggle with it, is where Network, you know, as the bonus film, so much about Network, I think, will always work. Not only that, but there's no part of both movies, again, are touching on challenging, important topics that I'm not like trying to shy away from any of those. But Network is a fully realized, picture perfect, absolute idea. And I think the thing that's surprising to me about Bamboozled is how messy some of it is. And if Bamboozled was as pristine as Network, it would be easy to talk about both of them side by side forever. Bamboozled just isn't that. It's messy.
And I don't think it can't not be messy. Like, as Spike Lee wanted it to be messy, and part of the issue is that works to convey some of it, but that means that it's going to be harder to the bar of entry is way higher. Like Network, you can tell anybody, go watch this movie. And
I'm doing it now.
Right. Exactly. We did it at the beginning of the episode. And the thing is that like, even if you don't like, even if it doesn't land message wise, you still get to watch a great movie. Whereas, or a pleasing to watch movie. Yeah. Whereas with Bamboozled, if you are not ready to be uncomfortable for 2 hours and 15 minutes,
and not just from the subject matter, from a visual, from the visual aspect of watching the film, then you're not going to have a good time.
Yeah.
So I would say that I watched Bamboozled. I would say that I watched it. And if you want to also go watch it, there's something in there.
Yeah.
And if you end up in a different place than I end up, or in a different place that Chris ends up, you should email us, us@fugazipod.com. Yeah, that's fucking plug time. Let's go.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliantly done.
Thank you. I've been thinking about that for a while. And let us know kind of where you end up if you decide to watch Bamboozled, with where kind of Spike Lee goes. Or if you think there are other specific, again, I don't spend a lot of time with Spike Lee. I don't watch a lot of films that he's really done for no reason other than I don't know. They just, we talked about The Room and who's in the room on the last time. So like, I'm not in the same room as Spike Lee. It's just not, it's not happening. I will, like, as far as things that are interesting, I guess I'm kind of interested to see where his visual language has changed from the year 2000 to now. And, kind of how he approaches that storytelling aspect of making a movie. So I'd be kind of interested to see what he did before this and kind of what he did after this. So I'll probably be watching more, but it's just not, I'm not thinking about it all the time. Network, I am. I'm now thinking about Network literally right now also. So we're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back with American Fiction. I'll be right back. Welcome back to Cultural Fugazi. we're gonna move on to our next movie. Sorry about the long episode, but not sorry. And we're gonna be talking about American Fiction, which we just watched at the movie theater not several hours ago.
Yes. Go watch this movie. Justice, I don't know about you, but I loved this movie, and I will admit, perhaps they made a movie for me.
Chris, if I had to describe one movie, if someone was like, I have a question about Chris, and I was like, yeah, and they're like, if I was to watch one movie, how would I know Chris? I would probably reference this film.
Yeah, turns out a pretty good contender for that whole thing.
Yeah, most Chris.
Oh my God. From the get-go, out the gate, as they say. So before we get into it, I do want to just remind us of the thesis to tie this all back.
Yeah, ground us back.
Yeah, absolutely. So our thesis was the worst versions of identity politics reduce people to archetypes. For example, the minstrelsy that we talked about with Bamboozled. And that collapses the experiences of groups of people into stereotypes. And the movies that we watched interrogate this. And so we're going to talk a bit about the ways in which American Fiction interrogates that and the ways in which it pushes back on that. And I just love what this movie does with that idea. And I think... Oh, yeah, go ahead.
No.
Well, I really appreciate... So we talked about the ways in which I think both Network and Bamboozled, which is essentially Spike Lee's Network, we talked about the ways in which that collapses the characters into archetypes in order to make a point. And this movie is so much about grounding all of this in people.
It's nearly the antithesis.
It really is. It's like, hey, what if instead of Delacroix being a terrible person who is flat and one-dimensional, what if you got a version of that was interesting and a person and you were rooting for?
What if it was a real lived experience that's not just a hyperbolic take on it? What if it's a person that you could see yourself being or could view someone else as having that specific experience instead of this radical, unheard of, specific take on this type of character? Everyone, really quick, let's get some of the paperwork out of the way with American Fiction. American Fiction is a movie. It came out technically last year so that it could be in a specific award season thing. Mm-hmm. And it is based on a book, which I did not know.
Yes, Erasure.
Yep. And it is a movie about a man who, a black man who works at a college who's a writer. Mm-hmm. And can't get his books out the door and then has to go back home and deals with his family. And then in his frustration of not being able to sell books, encounters a specific type of black experience stereotype book and writes one of his own.
Yeah. And he can't sell books because the books he writes are too smart.
Yep.
They're too fancy.
He's
writing fancy books, and no, one of them has footnotes, as we learned later on. I was like, oh, of course it does. Of course it does. Also, does not hurt that our main character is played by Jeffrey Wright. And he's so good.
So the thing that you're underselling here, the thing you're underselling is, I think we walked away from this. We saw the trailer for it.
Yes.
We watched it, and then we walked away from it. And I think this might be one of the best casted films.
Oh my God.
That I have seen at least this last year and this year. Right? Like at least 2023, 2024. Like
yes.
Incredible casting. Everyone is a delight to watch. There are some scenes with the whole family that the chemistry with everyone who is there is incredible. Also, everyone is the fucking prettiest person that you have ever.
There is a great moment where Sterling Brown is talking about getting cast in the movie. It's like, I hope they find someone hot to play me. I'm like, Sterling Brown, You are hot. They did it. They did
Well,
it.
and that's what he turns to him and says. He's like, I think they did.
Yes. Yes, it's so good.
It knows what it is.
Yes.
It and everyone is incredible. Like the entire film. It's interesting comparing this to Spike Lee's Bamboozled or having this conversation with Spike Lee's Bamboozled because this thing is so three-dimensional.
Yes.
Every single person is a human being, flaws and warts and all, and they all have their dreams and their ideas. They're all being challenged by personal growth and development, and they're not stagnant, and they're not just the concept of a thing.
The movie does exactly what the movie is so frustrated about not. And like this is part of the whole thing. It's like, hey, I wish there were more stories about the black middle class. I wish there were more stories about black people who are not in the ghetto, who are not these stereotypes. And that's what this movie is. And it's so good at doing that. It nails all of that so well. So well.
And it's incredibly funny.
Oh my God, yes.
It is incredibly. So I think we like the movie, Chris. So before we get super deep, I think we both liked it a lot.
I think that's fair to say, yes.
And it's a little bit easier for us to talk about it because of Bamboozled was a film that I think we wouldn't necessarily have said we liked. This is a movie that I think we can easily point to and go, this is a good movie, and it was fun to watch, and it was a great time.
I am definitely going to watch this movie again.
At least once.
At least once,
At
yes.
least once. So, some of the key points to get to, and this is not a unheard of trope in general. Some of the movies that we've seen have been doing this, but yes, it's a story of a middle-class black man who eventually writes his take, his minstrel show, right? His The Wire-esque,
we literally get a scene of him watching The Wire and being like, oh man. After he's like, man, they just want me to write the black quote unquote experience, and he's watching The Wire and he gets this face where he's like, because you can tell he's like, I don't want to do this. I'm probably gonna do this.
Yeah, and he's it definitely seems like it's an upper middle class family. Everyone's a doctor except for our.
Oh, he's also a doctor.
He's also a doctor, but not that kind of doctor.
That comes up a couple of times.
Yeah. His sister is she works at a Planned Parenthood
OBGYN, probably.
His brother is a plastic surgeon. His dad was also an OBGYN.
Yes.
And he's the professor.
Yes.
We were just talking about this, about how sometimes we have a lot of movies that we say a lot about, or we don't think we'll have a lot to say, and then we talk about them for like an hour. This is one of the scenarios that that you and I had talked about off microphone, where I was like, well, I really like this thing, and I don't know how much I have to say about it because I just want to. I want to gush, and instead of that, we got to ground it in the identity politics because it's so fucking good. It's incredible.
Well, hey, good news! Right out of the gate, I was watching the movie just to enjoy the movie, but the first scene, I was like, good news! We're good. We will have things to talk about.
Yeah. So we start with our primary character, who is Thelonious.
Thelonious Ellison. So a nice portmanteau of Thelonious Monk and Ralph Ellison, I believe. That is my guess.
So everyone calls him Monk.
Yes. And they have a bunch of delightful jazz in the background that is very reminiscent of Thelonious Monk. It's again. This is Chris Bate. That's what this movie is.
The whole
it's
thing,
just like, hey, is one of your favorite jazz artists Thelonious Monk? Like, shut up, movie. Yeah.
There literally could have been a giant box with his movie underneath it that someone pulled the string out from under you.
It's true.
If you ever want to catch Chris, that's how you catch Chris. So, he's in a college classroom, and
attempting to teach Flannery O'Connor. And the name of the story has the N-word in it. And this white this white student says to him, I find that word offensive. I don't want to spend this entire class with that word up on the board, because he's written the title of the book up on the board. And it's so good. He's like, hey, I think if I was able to get over it, you can probably get over it. And she's like, no, I hate it. And Jeffrey Wright makes the best faces in this movie. His faces are so good. And his eyes in this scene are perfect. It's just like this, it's angry and frustrated and just like, oh, God damn it. It's so good.
Yeah. And we've talked about this a little bit. We actually just read a book for our book club where we talked a little bit about like representation and where, I found something weird from one of the last books that we read that I described this before, that I wasn't necessarily offended for someone else. I just found the context of it frustrating. But we were able to have a conversation about it where sometimes I'm curious. You're in a different book club also, where sometimes I wonder if people can get over that outrage impression that they get of, oh no, this is bad.
Yeah.
To then also like have a full and complete thought and sentence around it, other than, oops, this is challenging.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because like I think this does kind of get back to some of the stuff that we talked about in the last episode, where you have this weird collapsing of identity politics into like these very strict, I will be okay with this and not okay with that, and we can never talk about this thing because this thing is bad. And what this initial scene is attempting to like have us interrogate is, when is it okay to have conversations that might involve dealing with, and Jeffrey Wright's character is like, hey, this class is about literature of the South. This word is going to come up occasionally. And it's delightful because there's a scene shortly after this where he's talking with some other professors and some administrators, and like in one of the last sessions, you accuse somebody's family of being a Nazi. He's like, well, I didn't necessarily accuse them, but like he squirmed a lot, so I'm pretty sure his family were Nazis.
He's German.
Yeah, we were talking about the plot against America, and he got real uncomfortable.
So he's like our primary character is immediately likable. Monk is fun. He's flawed. He's his motivations are easy to identify with.
Very human.
Yeah, and then he has to go home and visit his family, which he is not excited to do.
Very relatable. Yeah. Which I love my family.
Sure.
They're great. Like seriously. And actually part of what made this movie hit so hard for me, like the scene, oh man. So, spoilers. We didn't say this at the beginning because a lot of you probably won't watch Bamboozled, so whatever. But this movie, spoilers, we are going to talk about the plot. So if you should see it. You should go watch the movie.
Again, pull over.
Yeah, pause this.
Yep.
Go to a theater.
Type in Waze, Cinemark.
Yes, and then come back. Part of what made this movie hit so hard for me, like the scene where he is in the car with his sister, played by Tracy Ellis Ross, reminded me so much of conversations I have had with my sisters. And it felt so much like she's so delightful, and like he's kind of being an idiot and she's kind of being playful and delightful, but she's also kind of got her own nonsense going on. And it's so like, that's family. Like it's very clear. They do such a good job of making it feel like these are siblings who have maybe not always had the easiest time and maybe haven't even connected so much in like the last however many years. And now here they are reconnecting in a way that is really lovely and beautiful. And it works really, like, it's like, oh yeah, that is how family works. That is, family do be like that sometimes.
Yeah. As the movie goes on, we figure out, one, his sister dies unexpectedly.
Yes.
And she's been the primary caretaker of their mother, who is starting to show signs of Alzheimer's.
Yes.
And she's been the primary caregiver. She just went through a divorce semi-recently, yada, yada, yada. She passes.
And talk about, for a character who was only on screen for, again, like we talked about this right after the movie, like she's only on screen for like the first 10 or 15 minutes of the movie, and I connected and loved her so much. And then she's it's amazing. Tracy Ellis Ross is a gift and a treasure.
It's incredible because the movie feels very matriarchal.
Yeah.
And she very much is able to step in and fill out kind of the responsibilities of the family and really drive that stuff home with where the family's at currently.
Yep.
While being in it for a minimal amount of time.
Yes.
And that's the part that I think is incredibly effective, is that she's not in the movie the whole time, and we kind of move on from her, but her presence is still kind of felt throughout the rest of the movie, even when she isn't there. And I think that's what really makes her an effective character, is not only how much of an impact she has initially, but how much that impact continues to be meaningful as the movie continues to go on. So,
well, and I really do appreciate the way in which so her name Lisa, we get enough characterization from her, and again, Tracy Ellis Ross just like doing such great work here. You get enough of her in that initial section of the movie to very clearly understand how, like, the ripples make sense. Like, she comes back up where people will mention her, or things will happen where you know that this is connected to her, and it's unsurprising because she is such a strong presence and delivered so impactfully initially that it just, yes, it's like, of course.
And her written last words that Monk reads out on the beach, because her character is so fully realized and their relationship and her personality is so well developed, the gag last words bit that they do of like, I hope I passed doing what I wanted, which is underneath Idris Elba.
It's so good.
And I would settle with a second.
Yeah. Or more disgracefully,
Russell Crowe. Like, it's so, and she's such a, there's so much to that character with what time she's on screen that feels so earned.
Yes. She has I'm not going to spoil this because you should see the movie, but she has such a great joke in the car.
Oh my God.
That really does make the scene where they're delivering those, like, say, of course that's what you, like, that joke is so good. It's so good.
And no one was ready for it.
No.
Like the movie is kind of funny leading into that scene, and then that's where it's like, oh, okay, we're gonna, like, movie's got jokes.
Yes.
Movie has, like, we're gonna set up like a punchline. And everything kind of, it's such a great icebreaker. And every interaction that we have with our characters, whenever we meet Cliff, you know,
oh my God, yeah,
the coked out gay brother, who's the plastic surgeon, is so fun. You know, like slipping his mom and his housekeeper Oxy, you know, just to keep everyone in line.
You gave them medical heroin? He's like, calm down, I'm a doctor, it's fine. It's so good.
It's great. As we get into the film deeper, we kind of move. My favorite thing, because I turned to Chris and I literally said out loud, that's how you know this is Boston, is he's like, well, I got to leave school, I got to fly back home, and his sister picks him up from the airport or whatever, but he's calling his book agent whenever he lands, and he's literally walking out of a building holding a Dunkin' Donuts cup, and it's like, yeah, that's how you know it's Boston. And then, you know, a great joke about a Bruins jersey.
Yep. And then a cab refuses to pick him up because Boston, super racist. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. But I think we really set the stage on that upper middle class. And we do such a great job of building out kind of what that means to be not wealthy, but that upper middle class, they have a house and a beach house. They're all doctors or professors or whatever, but also they got to sell one of the houses. Also, they can't afford to really take care of mom. Also, everyone has their own problems, and it's usually around money. Multiples of them, the sister and the brother are both divorced, and that means that a lot of their money is tied up in with their former partners.
Well, and Jeffrey Wright has a great speech that happened, or a great thing that happens in like the middle of this movie after we get past like the conceit, where he's like, I just want to be able to write stories about people like me because my life is complicated and messy, and like I don't live in the ghetto, but like all the things that you just described are happening to him and his family, and that stuff. This is what the movie is about, and it's a compelling movie, so it proves the point, and this is the whole thing. But he's like, that I just want to see that. It's like, yes, Jeffrey Wright, I too want to see that, and you've given it to me in this movie. Thank you.
I think a lot of movies would take some of that stuff for granted, so I'm happy we get to really develop that, right? Yeah. Like, his sister, after his sister passes, she was the one paying for the electricity for mom. So like he shows up and the power's out.
Look, I'm not going to say that I know how that is, which is to say I know how that is. That yes, like that the moment he walked into that house, I'm like, oh, I know what's happening here, because the lights are all off, and they have a housekeeper who has been living with them and they've been paying, named Lorraine, who is delightful. And she's like, oh, Monk, did you pay the bill? Because that's what Lisa used to do. And he's like, what?
Yeah, I'm an currently on leave professor with no book sales under my belt.
Yes.
You can feel kind of the world squeezing, which makes some of the radical decisions Monk starts to make very believable. That frustration and anger that he feels is real. It is like you can see him getting mad at the world, and a little bit of, as everyone around him tells him he's being more and more like his dad every day, because his dad was the same way. Definitely don't know anything like that. So it was one of those things that I think really drives home how real all these characters feel and how these relationships are and their relationships with the world, so that we can do this ridiculous gag that he writes his, quote, Black Experience book.
Yes.
His drug dealing, gun shooting, gang violence, ghetto story that he writes under the pen name Stag R. Lee.
Stag R. Lee. Yeah, yeah. Stagger Lee. Yeah,
Stagger.
Yeah. So to get us to this point, so we've already set up a lot of the family stuff that does essentially drive why he makes that decision. So the reason that he even like goes on this trip to begin with is partially to like visit his family, but at the university, because of what happened with this student and because of what has been happening with these classes where people have been like, hey, you keep talking about these identity issues and a bunch of these students are uncomfortable with it. So, and oh my God, the three folks that he has to deal with, the one author who's like, I've written more books than you've written in 10 years. He's like, yeah, they're all airport bullshit. So great. I'm glad that you've been able to write crap for 10 years. Right. Some of us are trying to write real novels. It's amazing. And like that whole like petty, like it's so good because it's like, yeah, that's the petty nonsense that happens in college departments where English, oh, it's so good. And like, hey, bad news. We're going to ask you to take a break. Mm-hmm. So use this as an opportunity to go home and visit your family, and we'll figure things out eventually, which does sound a lot like you screwed up and we might fire you, but we're not quite there yet. So he's going home based on that. And he talks to his agent right after this because he's like, hey, I really need this book. He's got a book that hypothetically could land with this publisher Echo. He's like, I really need this book to land because one of the arguments in this like dismissal was that he hasn't published anything in a long time. And his agent is like, I got bad news. They don't want it. They said this book, The Persians, what does it have to say about the black experience? He's like, I'm a black author and I wrote the book. Isn't that enough? And his agent's like, no, you know what they want.
Yeah. Some of the fun things with the agent being where is he from? His family moved in from Cuba.
Yeah, they're Latinx.
Yeah,
it is.
He says it as much of like as they start to make fun of white people.
Yeah,
we moved into
it's like the Philippines or something. It is. It's Latinx.
Yeah, to take all these white people for a ride, which is what they do with this book that eventually gets written, which is named My Pathology.
Yeah, PAF.
Yep.
Which he starts. Okay, but before we get there, we should talk about Sitara's book, which is
So he goes to Boston to visit his family, but he's actually going for a book convention
yes.
at the Boston Convention Center, which is a really nice convention center. I've been there for PAX.
Oh yeah. We've both been there for PAX.
Yeah, so it's a nice convention center, and the thing, they're in a small room, no one's really there, and it's also very funny that it's 3 black authors and 1 white guy, and the white guy is the only person shown talking the whole time.
It's true. And while he's talking, so Thelonious is spelled wrong on his card, so he's in the process of adding the O, and he adds it and puts it down, and then the conference is done.
Yep. So we kind of move from this into this other writer who's blowing up, and she's written this bestseller, and it's picking up steam everywhere, and what the fuck is the book called? How I Lives My. Oh, man, it's something like it's like how I lives through this, or like
yeah.
So take that. And she's like, well, I went to college, and they're doing the book interview before they do the reading.
Yes.
And it's, I went to undergrad and I had a job.
So this is after, so Thelonious has left the panel that he was on with these 3 black authors and this 1 white author to see, because somebody mentions like, well, he's like, this seems really small. Like what's going on? And they're like, well, everyone's here to see Sitara and see her talk about her book. And he's like, what? He's like, oh, you don't know? She's got this best-selling. And so he goes to see what all the fuss is about and goes into this room where it's much bigger. And it is Issa Rae, who is Sitara, who is discussing, like, she is talking about her background, which is she went to Oberlin.
Oh, was it Oberlin?
It was Oberlin.
Huh,
yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
That lodged right here. I was like, oh yeah, that's near us.
Yeah. No. I've stayed overnight at Oberlin.
Yeah.
For bike rides. Yeah.
That's where all the identity politics happens.
And while she's talking through the book, and she's like, and I had a job at a publisher, and I put in a
first
lot of,
reader. Yeah,
I put in a lot of work, and I read a lot of stories, and I wasn't seeing my specific type of story represented. And she's coming off as middle class. She's college educated. She's had a job in the field for a while, and then she starts reading from the book, and it's all, it's all very
not middle class.
It's not middle class.
Yeah.
It's not. It's all very Ebonics.
Yeah, the
influence.
diction is very much like street talk. Very much like what you would assume is stereotypical. Like, this is like poor again. Like we talked about with Bamboozled. It's like. It's what Dimwitty wanted. It's like, this is the poor black folks doing the thing, like the crackheads and the like.
And
part of the reading is about like
pregnancy test. I gotta go get another pregnancy
this
test.
This time he's gonna be a real father to my child. It's like, oh god.
Yeah, and
you see Jeffrey Wright rolling his eyes at like so much of this, which is perfect.
The whole thing, and then after she does the reading that sounds like that, the first person that stands up is a white lady. Like, there's
also, I believe, the editor who ends up picking up the book later on.
Oh, okay. I missed that part. So yeah, there's so much with like subtleties for cowards. This movie has a little bit of subtlety. But yeah, no, this part of it, the satire part we talked about this earlier. You cannot really do satire with a subtle lens. It can be misconstrued and misinterpreted. So yeah, we're not doing subtlety here either. And it's great. Like it's super fun. He rolls his eyes directly into the back of his skull.
Yes. But this book is a bestseller. Everyone loves it. It's on like these lists of like, this is a book that a bunch of people are talking about in like frames of like, this is going to win awards. This book is like changing the landscape. And Jeffrey Wright's character is like, are you this? Like, I'm writing these really like finely crafted masterpieces of literature, and this is what's going to win awards?
And then he's finding out that his books are being left in the African American Studies department of the Barnes and Noble, because he's like, well, I would assume he asked the kid who's stocking the shelves at the Barnes and Noble. He was like, well, I'd assume the author is probably African American. And he's like, well, that does not make the book.
Yeah, he's like, that author is me, and me is African American. I am, yes.
But that doesn't make the book a book about African American studies just because I'm a black author who wrote a thing. Like, that's not what that is. He's like, it's just literature. It's not. It's not an African American studies book. And then he passes her book as he goes to find the regular literature department. He finds her book, and there are eventually, as the movie goes on, those two characters interact at a deeper level, and they also understand that there's a lot of common ground between the two of them, and some of the pessimistic and nihilistic thoughts of Monk, is not something that that she, as the author of the other major book in the movie, she does not share those ideas. And they have a great conversation at the end of the film where they kind of talk about Monk's jadedness. And, he's even said earlier, he's like, I don't see race. We're just people. We're people who happen to be black. And we're
literally, when he lands,
yep,
he's like, I don't see race. He tries to hail a cab, and it passes by him to pick up a white person.
Race sees him,
which is literally what again, subtlety. That is what his agent says to him on the phone as that is happening. He's like, I don't see race. It's like, well, race sees you.
Right.
Boom.
And then eventually, they talk through this when they're both in the same room to judge these book awards. And
so I think what makes that interesting is what does he do to like attempt to push back against this? Because the conversation that they have only happens because of the decisions that he makes about his writing career. Because he says, well, his agent says, I'm going to need you to give me something that's blacker because that's what they want. That's what they want.
If you want to sell books, you have to write this.
Yeah, and Jeffrey Wright's character, Monk, is like, what do you mean? And he's like, you know what I mean. And of course, Monk knows exactly what he means. And this is when we get the scene of him watching The Wire, and eventually that leads to him writing My Pathology.
My Pathology.
Yes.
Which eventually is renamed to just the word fuck.
Which, so this to me, like, and this is very much where you can see how this movie is in conversation with Bamboozled, because like this is where the Monk's character is doing what De La kind of did, but did in a way that wasn't sincere enough. And Monk actually does want to like attempt to show people
to fail.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's like, no, this is stupid, and I want you all to recognize that. Whereas De La actually wants white people to like him, and Monk doesn't. Monk, the entire time, Monk is like, this is garbage. Why do you people like this so much? And he writes the thing that white people want. He writes that in My Pathology, and you get this lovely scene where he's sitting down at his typewriter and he's typing out some stuff, and you get these two characters, like this, like very, very stereotypical ghetto like thug with an eye patch and a do-rag, wearing a jersey, and older black dude that you learn, oh, that's his dad, right. But like his dad didn't stick around for his mama.
He's drinking a liquor out of a brown bagged bottle.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, he goes on to write that book. And I really like that scene where they set up like his writing process, which is really fun because eventually the characters are asking him what the fuck they say. And he's like, I don't know. He's like, we'll just say whatever the dumb thing that white people expect us to do.
It's great when I think the character's Maynard is like, hey, what do I say now? And he's like, well, say this. He's like, that? And it's like, no, you're right. He redoes it. And then so the dad is played by Keith David, who is fantastic. Mm-hmm. And only in the movie for 5 minutes, it's still so good. And at the end of the scene, Keith David, like he delivers this great like monologue where he's like, yeah, I ain't shit, your mama ain't shit, you ain't shit, so of course I left you. Of course I didn't stick around, because who cares? None of this matters. And it's such a great scene. And like, then his son ends up shooting him and then delivers this ridiculous monologue about like, I'm black and I hate myself, blah, 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 blah. And then Keith David's character gets shot and he's like, really?
Why did you do that?
and Monk is like, oh. It's so good.
It's so fun.
So this ends up being the book that he writes to attempt to like, and his whole goal is, I'm going to give you this shitty book that is terrible, just like Bamboozled. I'm going to give you the stereotype that is so terrible that no one could possibly want this. And when people refuse this, that will prove my point. That will tell you that, like, yes, no one actually wants to do this. Which, just like Bamboozled, bad news. People do want the thing that he is giving them.
He gets his first callback immediately. The first publisher that he talks to immediately calls back with like a $750,000 deal. He's now trying to take, after his sister died, he's now trying to take care of his mom. Mm-hmm. His brother is saying he doesn't have any money either, so the money would be nice. He's trying to convince himself, fuck the money, but also his agent and him are both kind of like, well, it is a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And they go on to eventually accept the deal to publish my pathology. And then that also immediately turns into movie rights.
Yes.
Because people are talking about the book with the publisher, and the publisher is super excited about it. So yes. He gets and he has to start pretending to be Stag R. Lee.
Yeah, so initially he gets to do this with the publisher over the phone. And his agent is like, look, I told them you're a fugitive, so you can't be on camera because you might get arrested. So like you're really careful about your identity. And it's great because he starts the conversation off talking like a California English professor, and the publisher is like, I'm sorry, what? And his agent,
you don't sound like how I would expect you to sound. Like,
just hey, more street. You need to be more street. So then they put the phone back on, and then like he does his best like street impression, and like convinces her that yes, he is indeed from the ghetto. And then he ends up having to meet this studio executive in person. And he's like, no, he really wanted to meet you because he wants to make sure, like, he doesn't invest in people if he can't like have a face to face. So you gotta just do the thing. Just do. So he shows up at this restaurant and he takes his glasses off. He's wearing khakis.
Yeah, he's wearing a t-shirt and khakis,
yes.
And that's his version of being street.
Yes,
it's very good.
Yes.
And then he orders a white wine,
a fancy white wine. Yes,
the driest of his.
Make sure it's the driest. Yeah. Yes.
Oh, it's so good.
And Adam Brody, who plays the director, is like, oh, I wouldn't have expected somebody like you to order a fancy white wine. I wouldn't expect someone from prison. He's like, you know a lot of people in prison.
Oh, it's so fun. And then eventually, like, he's worried about his mom the whole time that he's there because his mom is being watched by the people over at his agent's office, mm-hmm. and a hospital shows up. So he's looking out the window.
Hears sirens.
So it looks like he's looking for cops. So
he's really nervous and furtive.
So he runs away, and they're like, and it turns out his mom's fine.
Yes.
And he's like, well, that probably really ruined this movie deal. And they're like, no, they thought you were running from sirens from cops. So
because you're a fugitive on the run.
You're a fugitive. So no, they loved you.
Yes.
And this happens in parallel to him dating He meets a woman, Coral, who is just getting through a relationship, and they start hanging out, and he's lying to her about what his life is currently with the publishing stuff. He's not telling anyone.
But not initially. Like, initially they meet, and, like, she likes one of his books, and, like, they hit it off, and it's really great. And then he does the Stag Arlie stuff, and he doesn't tell her or anybody about it.
And as he continues to do that, it starts to pick up pressure.
Yeah.
Eventually, she likes some of his writing. She eventually, after the book gets published and they're still talking through the movie rights get sold, and he's able to afford sending his mom to a single room,
which is incredibly expensive.
Single room, facility, or she has her own room. She doesn't have a roommate for the facility that she's going to be in. Everyone's asking where the fuck the money is coming from, and he just doesn't. He lies.
Yeah, he obfuscates the entire time. Like, his brother shows up and is like, how are you affording this? Like, Lisa had some stuff in the will, and his brother's like, Lisa was broke because of the divorce. That can't be right. And he's like, do you want to pay for this room? And his brother's like, no, it's cool. Whatever.
It's fine. Whatever. Yeah, fuck it. And so, like, he's doing this with his girlfriend. He's doing it with his family. We learn more that his dad was a liar all the time, and everyone knew, and everyone just kind of went along with it because he eventually asked his mom, you knew Dad was having an affair or having affairs all the time. Why did you stick around? She's like, well, he would have been lonely.
He was a genius. He was lonely, and if I had left, what would he have had?
Yep.
And then
she calls him Cliff instead of.
She's like, you're a genius too, so it's the same Cliff. It's like, oh,
yeah,
God.
It's a lot.
Oh.
It's a lot. And eventually, at some point in time, there are more movies about Alzheimer's that we could watch. And if you just want to really fucking ugly cry, we can totally do that if you want to. Because it happens in Creed.
Oh yeah.
It happens here. But yeah, no, super effective whenever that stuff happens. And
it's also important to note that, and like, this is part of what this movie does really, really well. Again, like I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation about this movie gives you the thing that both Bamboozled and this movie at the beginning talk about wanting. Give us a story that is emotionally impactful about, like, Black folks that aren't the stereotype. And this story about his mom and about, like, everything that's happening there is so incredibly effective and impactful, and it works so well because of and the mom is kind of terrible, but also maybe not. It's like, it's very complicated because they're all fully, like, realized people. As it turns out, people are complicated and are both great and terrible. And your parents are a nightmare.
Yeah.
But also, you are only here because of them.
Yeah, it's this amazing concept that maybe your parents are people too.
Yes!
Right. Just like you.
Yes!
As we get to the relationship with him and his girlfriend Coral, and she meets the rest of the family and meets his mom, and he's lying to her all the time, she eventually reads Stag Arlie's book that has been retitled, and one of my favorite scenes of the network or the publishing executive and marketing guy is like, even Michael B. Jordan, hey, we love Michael B. Jordan. We do.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's like, hey, Michael B. Jordan has expressed some interest in doing this, and like we're gonna get him with like one of those like those like, things on his head. God. And Jeffrey Wright is like, you mean a do-rag? It's like, yeah, and like
a scarf on his head.
Yes,
right?
a
scarf, one of those scarves on his head. And oh my God, it's so good. But also they're like, well, we're gonna get him on the cover and whatever, and that's whenever he goes full on fuck this thing. He's like, I want to rename the title of the book from my.
He wants to torpedo the whole thing at this point. He's like, this is bullshit. I'm fed up. I hate this. I don't want to do it. I'm going to make this a problem.
So he renames the book on the phone call. He says, you can only publish the book. Otherwise, I'm going to cut the deal. You can only publish the book if we rename the title to Fuck. And they do.
They do. They do. They take a brief, like 5-minute conference, and they come back and they're like, you know what?
We can do that.
Yeah. We love it. We're in.
Yeah. So his girlfriend, Coral, eventually reads Fuck, and Monk has to come to the realization that someone who he respects their opinion actually finds something interesting in the book that he has written that he does not like himself. And that's the back bit of the movie is him coming to terms with the fact that people are going to now ingest this thing that he tried to fucking sink. And some people are going to walk away with a good time. And that's terrible.
Well, and his opinion about this work is this is doing exactly what the minstrel show from Bamboozled is doing. This is demeaning us as a people. This is furthering stereotypes. This is pandering to what white people want, the box that white people want to put black people into. That's what this book is giving them. And so they get to read this and feel good about themselves because, look, I'm engaging with the black experience. He's like, that's not the black experience. And like you said, this person that he respects is like, I found some things in here that were worth like being interested about and liking and enjoying. And he's like, this is trash. This is garbage. No one should like this. No one should respect this. How can you respect this? And he ends up projecting onto her like, you must not be a good person if you like this.
Which, without the context of the minstrel show, I think from some of that stuff to really understand, hey, you can have interesting, compelling things while also making a terrible, a humanely, the idea that it's bad, right?
Yeah.
You can do a good thing and a bad thing,
yeah.
right? So the idea that these people are finding something to like out of his minstrel show is very, now that we've seen something similar on Bamboozled, well, of course, it's the same thing with the white lady wearing blackface standing up and telling everyone that she's also an N-word, right? And so he has that visceral reaction that we had watching Bamboozled with some of those scenes, going, well, how can you respect how can you respect this thing, and how can I respect you if you have positive views on this?
Yes.
And that's reinforced over and over and over again as the book goes through more things, and he's on the judging panel of a literary award, which is a direct conflict of interest, but he never talks about it, which is funny to me. And he's on that judging panel where it's 3 white authors and himself and the other author from earlier.
Yeah, Centaura.
Centaura. And the end of the movie, as we start to work our way through the end, we're going to maybe come back for some other stuff, but as we work our way through the end, he sits down and has a conversation with her about the differences between his book that he wrote, that he hates, and her book.
Yeah, it turns out that Fuck has been published right at the perfect time to have to be considered for this award. And the publisher has submitted it to be considered for the award that he is a judge for. So he's a judge, Centaura's a judge, and we've got these 3 other white folks that are judges. And when they're having a conversation about the book, him and Centaura are like, this book is bad. Don't no. Please no.
Oh my God. And it's such a great fucking joke. Whenever the 2 black people in the room are like, we don't think this book should win the award. And they're like, well, we think we really need to listen to black voices.
Scene. It's so good.
Oh my God. And it's the 3 white people standing on the one side of the table.
Yes!
Oh my God. It's great.
It's so good. Yes.
Subtlety is for cowards. Let's make that totally clear. Subtlety is for cowards. It works so well.
Yes. But before that scene happens, Monk and Centaura have a conversation where Monk is like, hey, so fuck, you didn't like the book. Can you tell me more about like what you didn't like about it? And she expresses the fact that like it felt like it was very pandery. She says all the things that Jeffrey Wright's character has said about this book, the ways in which this book is frustrating and bad and not a good representation of black folks. And she's like, it didn't feel authentic. It felt like somebody pandering to a white audience and just giving them what they want to hear. And then he goes, I agree completely. How is this different from your book? Because I'm not going to lie, I haven't read your book, but the excerpts that I have read or heard feel really similar to that. And she goes, yeah, but I did a lot of research and I talked with a lot of people and I represented their experiences in this book. And so this book is not necessarily my lived experience, but this is somebody's lived experience. And I am presenting that. And you don't always have to write your life. Like, you can present somebody else's experience. Like, the point is just to put that on paper. And he's like, yeah, but like, aren't you worried that this is demeaning the culture? Aren't you worried that like this is putting us into that, this is pigeonholing us, that this is shoehorning us? Don't you worry that this isn't like, that we're not living up to our potential?
Yeah, that's the line. The living, aren't you worried that we're not living up to the, like, black people aren't living up to the potential, or our people aren't living up to the potential, is what he says.
Yes.
And oh my God, she throws that right back on his face in a way that is glorious.
Yes.
Which is,
it is so good.
When you say potential, you mean that I'm gonna fuck this up.
You're telling me that we're not good enough as we are.
Right.
So basically, you don't love black people the way they are. You need us to be better than what we are. Any of our experiences should be good, but you only love some of those experiences. And only some of those are what you consider good.
Yeah, it is. She does it in like 2 lines in a way that means, and he does the only logical thing you could do if that happened to you. He immediately goes and sits in a stairway.
Yeah, thinks about his life decisions.
Yeah, he goes, oh no, oh shit, and then like sits alone and has to dwell on the fact that that is his opinion and his emotions. And then does the next logical thing, which is text and X. Mm-hmm. Text and X, excuse me. Oh, saying text and X.
Yeah.
Yeah, I keep wanting to throw that T on the back of there. And says, I should tell you why I'm frustrated, and like I should open up to the world and let people know like why I'm mad at this. And
yeah, when he finds out that Coral likes fuck, he reads her the riot act and says, you're terrible for liking this, and she's like, you should get out for exactly the reasons that Sintara lays out, which is basically like, you think that you are better than this, and that's a problem. And if you can't accept this, then I don't need you here. And he realizes, I have perhaps, maybe I'm wrong here.
Yeah, maybe I fucked up.
Maybe I didn't do the good thing.
Yeah. He goes on to win that book award. But before he does so, he does tell his agent that he wants to talk to the movie producer, the movie guy, one more time. And then we find out that after the book award, that what we're actually seeing on the screen is his interpretation of him telling, or the script that he wrote for this movie producer of his story.
Yes.
Now he's told the movie producer, obviously, that he's not a wanted convict or whatever. He's kind of pulled the curtain back. And they go through they do the clue thing where they go through multiple different versions of the ending to try to figure out which version of the ending would be right for the movie.
Yeah, it's really good.
And then he leaves. He goes out and gets in the car with his brother, and he leaves. And that's when they do the casting thing.
Yeah.
About who's going to play his brother and are they going to be hot enough?
Yeah. Well, and I really love the way that this works, because you understand based on this scene that a lot of what we've seen here is probably true or close to true. And he says this delightful thing about not delightful, it's upsetting, but the Coraline situation. He's like, well, she won't answer my phone calls. And like that is lovely because that is real. It's like you don't get the movie ending with them where she embraces him with open arms. Like you see in a couple of these scenes that are the movie scenes where like she shows up at the award ceremony in this beautiful dress and is like, what did you have to tell me? It's like she didn't do that because like an actual human being, she's like, no, you were terrible and I don't want to talk to you. And so like you don't get to just show back up in my life. And so you get the sense that there's the reality of his lived experience, which we've been seeing something that's akin to that like throughout his family like life and what's happened with his mother and his brother. And then you get like the movie version of and this is kind of reminiscent of Network, where like you get the scene at the end where Max is talking with Diane and he's like, I know. And even before that, when he's like leaving his wife, he's like, she's played this out like with a bunch of different like scripts. And so in one, I commit suicide, and one, like I almost always come back to you, but like who could say? And at the end of their relationship, he's like, all you have is scripts. All you have is like this narrative that you're telling us. And like the movie gives you the narrative, but also tells you that's not what really happened, which is great.
Yeah. It was, as we watched it, Chris, seeing a movie with you is always great because you are the loudest laugher in the room. Every time.
I was having a very good time.
And I feel like the first real like gut punch laugh moment really allowed the rest of the room to open up. I think it was very beneficial for you to let everyone know this is actually fucking funny.
Yes.
Like, please, like, that was great. And it was a good time. Like, everyone watching that movie in a room, I think everyone was there to have a good time. Like, It was fun.
Yes.
It's been a while since I've seen like a comedy really in a theater, I think. It's been a bit, so like I like laughing in a room with people. It's more fun to do that with other people. It's a good time. And obviously I think we both fucking really liked it.
Yeah.
That's the easy way to put that.
Yes.
Now, all of that from the perspective of the identity politics of the film, just like Bamboozled, nothing here is subtle, right? The thing that makes this movie more effective than Bamboozled to me to watch is that it's just everyone's a real person.
Yes.
And we don't have to do the thing where we distill a human being down to a singular idea and try to justify their decisions later on. Every single decision every single person makes is a real human being decision.
Yes.
And it's delightful to watch something smart and intelligent that doesn't have to do that. And there are plenty of smart, intelligent movies that also have to fall down that rabbit hole of, no, this person now represents the idea of a thing, and they have to behave the way that the idea of the thing would behave instead of the way that the character would be, because now the character has to become this idea.
Yes.
This movie does not fall prey to that at all. Everyone's a real human being, and it really works for selling a lot of the message that the movie has in it.
Yeah, one of the things that I do really love about this movie is I do feel like the thing that you get, and we've mentioned this a couple times already, is that this movie does the thing that Bamboozled wants to have in the world. And this movie also it gives you the story of the black middle class characters who are living their lives and running through these dramas, and it shows you this is compelling, this is important, and this is something that, like, this is a story that is something that we can all connect with and is worth having space. And so where Spike Lee gives you the archetypes and gives you the idea and wants to tell you the ways in which the media has failed us and the ways in which the media is attempting to like subjugate the experience of black folks and turn it into a commodity and turn it into a minstrel show. This movie is like, hey, yeah, we agree. We're going to give you an antidote to that. So I think, like, the theme of our show, and I'm so happy. I was thinking about this.
Don't worry. As soon as you've been on this topic, I was like, he's gonna bring it around.
It's true. So like, I was hoping that this would be the case, and I almost texted this to you. I'm like, after watching Bamboozled and Network, I'm like, I don't feel super optimistic after watching these two movies.
They're all very.
I kind of feel bad about everything. I feel like things are not good. I think that we are in a bad place.
Everything sucks. Yeah.
Yeah. But this movie really does offer an antidote to that. And the way it does that is by grounding this in the lived experience of people. It shows you these humans. It gives you, hey, these are lives. These are lives. These are people that you end up caring about deeply throughout the movie. I was very invested in everybody.
The wedding scene. The wedding scene is a delight. And then the two gay twinks that are there, like, oh, it's so good.
Dancing with the mom, who's like weird about gay people until she's dancing with them, which is a very common black mom experience. It's fine. But yeah,
it's so good.
And like a lot of that, like, we didn't even talk about the way that the movie handles the black queer experience, which it does really well. Like, I have not seen a movie that has done as good a job of this since, like, Moonlight. Like, this movie really does a great job of, like, making that character, Cliff, a fully realized human, despite the fact that he's not on screen a ton, but every moment he is on screen is great. And, like, you really...
The fuck you, Phil, is so good.
Oh my God, it really is. It really is. I never liked you. It's so good. But yeah, like what the movie ends up doing is making this, and we talk about this a lot on the show. It makes this about people, and it does the thing. What Spike Lee wants to do is make sure that you understand the idea of minstrelsy and the ways in which it is harmful. And it is effective at that. I think it does a great job at that. And I think that's an important message. But you can't stop there. There has to be another step. All right, so we don't want minstrelsy. What is the alternative? And American fiction is the alternative. This is what you get when you get to do something that is not the minstrel show. And this movie delivers that so well. It is so... All these characters are fully realized. All these characters you care about. And by the end of the movie, I am so happy to have spent this time with all of these people. And I would love to spend more time with them in a way that is not what you get with a minstrel show. Mm-hmm. Because these are people. And it's so good.
Yeah. I 1,000% agree. It is an absolute delight. As we wind down,
yes,
bonus round.
Yes,
we haven't done one of these in a while.
That's true.
If you were going to write a book about something that you thought was trashy and abysmal, what would your topic be?
I mean, look, the problem is that Sarah J. Maas has already done what I would probably do. So
yeah. Which one is that? The one where the fairies do coke?
I was gonna say Pixie's doing coke, but you're right. It is fairies. Yes, yes.
It's the one where the fairies do coke, which is great. Last bonus round. Only two. So, if you had an opportunity to put out something into the world knowing that you hated it, how would you sink the ship? And how would you be more effective than everyone else who fails?
See, I think this gets to the core issue at play here, that honestly, both of these movies are a cautionary tale. Don't put anything out into the world that you would not be willing to stand behind. Look, if I put something out into the world, bad news, and this is a thing that we have learned constantly. Mm-hmm. Once it is in the world,
you can't take it back.
It's done. Yeah. You have no control over it. And as somebody who likes to have control over the things that they create, I'm just not gonna do it.
That's why you let me edit all the episodes of the podcast. I know how much you love control, which is why I have all of it.
Well, see, this is the thing.
You would let me edit it. That's how you would.
Well, I know. I can't because we've already done this. I've edited one episode, and it was a nightmare for reasons, but too much control.
Yep.
And turns out sometimes that leads to anxiety.
Yeah. Who knew?
Yeah.
So, all right. So if you had to sink the ship, you couldn't. You just can't.
No. I think the ship is, once it's set sail.
Yeah.
Unlike what Le Guin tells, I take that back. Le Guin just tells it that there will be a storm. So the storm doesn't necessarily sink the ship, but there will be a storm.
A storm.
So I guess I'd try to be the Le Guin storm.
Yeah, sure. If I wanted to destroy something that I had created, if I had to really fuck something up, if I had to really, really do it, if I was like, Chris, I have this terrible idea, we're going to do this thing, and you're like, great, and then we did it, and then I had to stand behind it, and I hated it. And I knew that I had to destroy it. I'd probably teach it how to love. That's probably what I would do. Probably teach it how to love, yeah.
Well, as we learned from the movie today, love does destroy you. So, sure.
Yeah, that's what I would
Actually, you know what? This does, yeah, sure. So just introduce it to family.
Yeah, introduce it to family. There you go.
Yeah. Which the unfortunate thing for me is that it doesn't work now because my family's great.
You know, yeah, I understand. But yeah, you could just teach it how to love. I think that would destroy most things.
Indeed.
Oh. We have a plan for February.
Oh, we do have a plan for February.
So we can tell you most of this now.
Yes.
February is going to be our month of a labor of love. And so we're going to read some books about labor. And we're going to try to find some movies, probably try to steer it towards rom-coms or rom-com adjacent stuff that has to do with usually something that either follows the theme or is at least tied to some of these books. I couldn't tell you the exact bibliography that we're going to have for now. There's a couple books that we've picked out that I think we like that we're gonna do. But that's the theme, so we'll stick with something Valentine's Day adjacent, and we'll do that for the month of February.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, unions are good, and we're probably going to talk about them in February.
Yeah, probably. So if you want to get a hold of us about stuff, as we said before, email us us@fugazipod.com and let us know what you think about any of the junk that we talked about today. Tell us how you would destroy something that you created. And let us know what you think. And we'll see you soon.
Yeah, thank you.
Every time I'm like, well, I definitely ate like half of a sandwich. Like, why am I so fucked up? Why am I drunk?
It's like, remember when I had those 7 almonds? That should be enough, right?
That's enough food, right?
Almonds are very filling.
Subtlety is for cowards.